What up, TCK Podders? Welcome back to the program. This is another episode of the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast, aka TCK Pod. I'm your host, Sky Guasco, back for another episode 439. I'm with my man, Bobby LaMarco, per usual, and we have a very special guest on the program today, Mr. Jared Smola. We are breaking down the must-have players for us this season. Jared has 3. Bobby and I each have 2. We're going to get into those in just a little bit, but first I want to introduce our guest today, Jared Smola on Twitter, Smola DS, senior editor at Draft Sharks, number 2 draft season ranker and number 10 in-season ranker for Fantasy Pros expert consensus ranking just last year. Been up in the top 10 a few times. We talk about ECR all the time on this show, Jared. We mentioned expert consensus ranking, ECR, ADP, all these things. First of all, welcome to the program. Thank you for taking some time out. And what exactly is it to be a part of the ECR, the expert consensus ranking? Tell us a little bit about your experience with that over the years.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I'm excited to talk some football. Great time of year. You know, we're only a couple weeks away now from real football. So, yeah, I mean, the Fantasy Pros thing, I've done it 4 or 5 years now. It's gotten such recognition that it's important. Like, I spend a lot of time every week, making sure my Fantasy Pros rankings are in tip-top shape. So, I mean, you see, if you do well, it's a large audience you're getting out to. So it's been good. We were talking before the show, there's definitely some game theory involved to the whole thing, which, adds some strategy to it. So it's fun. And, again, it's a process. I spend, the entire week breaking down all these games, and then, go in Thursday and set the rankings based on all that analysis. So.
Yeah, it's just kind of like a lot of hurry up and wait until the end of the week with all of your rankings and everything. I appreciate that. Of course, we're running tonight live on YouTube via Fantasy Focus Network, and we're on Periscope as well. If you're jumping in and you want to hop in the comments section for Jared or ourselves, please make sure to do that, and we'll get to as many questions as we possibly can. Bobby, how you feeling this evening, man? You ready for this one?
I'm ready to go, man. Talk about we got some heat coming today. I like it. We got Jared. Not only was he number 2 in season long drafts, he was 10 in season long. So no matter what you need, we got this covered in the top 10 style. We're gonna change ECR when we reference it to Jared. That's just gonna be Jared's ranking. So we're gonna make sure to give him love for the rest of the way out. But I'm excited for this episode.
I like that, man. I'm very excited. Before we get into it, I do want to, Jared, I want to rip your article a little bit. Of course, Draft Sharks is a huge avenue for us to get information. I read your article this morning that dropped, which was your week 2 preseason recap, essentially. Huge performances this week, some position battles, of course, a lot of starters still not even participating. So giving some of the younger guys an opportunity, of course, a couple of injuries too, unfortunately, as well. You broke down every single game from this last week. What are maybe 1 or 2 things that popped off for you in your research? You did some carry counts, target share, snap share percentages. What are maybe just 1 or 2 things that popped out to you over this last weekend of preseason week 2?
Yeah, it's funny too, breaking down these preseason games. It actually takes longer to break down the preseason games than it does regular season stuff. Cause the preseason, you have to figure out if these, the guys are playing starters, how many starters they're playing, kind of what their intentions are. So it takes a while to figure it out. I think two rookies stand out to me. One just for an on-field performance. Terrace Marshall is just jumping off the screen to me. He just looks ready to make an impact. He looks like an NFL receiver. Looks like a number 1 NFL wide receiver. I don't think he's going to be that in Carolina. But I think, Carolina produced 3 top 35 wide receivers last year. And I know McCaffrey was out for a lot of that time, but Mike Davis saw much targets too. So I think there's room for Marshall to be a fantasy factor even behind DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. And then kind of a rookie stock down has to be Michael Carter, who, I think fantasy drafters have been treating as the Jets' number 1 running back. He saw 0 snaps with Zach Wilson and the first team offense in the second preseason game. It was Tevin Coleman and Ty Johnson splitting that first team stuff. So I still think Carter by the end of the year will score the most fantasy points in the Jets backfield, but it's looking like he's not a guy we'll be able to use in fantasy lineups early on this season.
Man, that's unfortunate. Rookie drafts in Dynasty, he was, going in the first round, even sometimes maybe the second round there. So big draft capital, at least in rookie Dynasty drafts. Hopefully he will get his time, but you got to make sure you're paying attention to the draft share, though. So make sure to go over to Draft Sharks and check out Jared's article from this afternoon as well. Unfortunately, Jared, within, and look, Marquez Callaway, who Bobby's been repping for a few weeks now, was all of a sudden the hot topic in fantasy this morning. Bobby's been repping him for quite a while. Had a huge game last night with Jameis and everything. That was great to see with the absence of Michael Thomas. Unfortunately, though, we also have a big injury in Dynasty and fantasy and just NFL in general with Travis Etienne going down with the Liz Frank injury, potentially missing the entire season. Even if he does come back, he's not going to be as productive as we hoped for this season. Bobby, I know you have our hot topic question of the day here, so why don't you jump into that quick, and then we'll get into our must-have players.
Yeah, so every time we do an episode, we do a hot topic of the day because it's brought to you by one of our sponsors, Bomb Banana Hot Sauce. If you're love the hot sauce, we always suggest you check out seekthespice.com. It's banana-based, not banana-flavored. And if you use that promo code TCK, you get 10% off your order. So, Jared, our hot topic of the day is one of those rookies that Sky just brought up, Travis Etienne, going down with that injury. The question now comes is, how high are you willing to take James Robinson? Second round, third round? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, and Etienne was placed on IR a couple hours ago. So he is officially done for the season. So that we don't have to wonder about that anymore. And my Etienne was a guy I went back and forth on all summer, and I drafted him a few times in like round 5, round 6, so I hurt a bit. I didn't draft much James Robinson, but my concern with Etienne all along was I don't trust this Jacksonville coaching staff. Like Urban Meyer from the start, he just the moves he's made, the comments he's made, and largely about the Etienne stuff, just how he said he wanted to draft Kadarius Toney, and he took Etienne as like a backup, and then he's going to play Etienne at wide receiver, but whatever. I don't trust the coaching staff. The offense hasn't looked good in the preseason, I don't think, so far. But, Robinson, I think you're buying volume again. He was, one of the busiest running backs in the NFL last season. Jacksonville did add Carlos Hyde, who has a history with Urban Meyer. Again, that's kind of my concern. Like, are they going to play Carlos Hyde more than we want to see? But if they don't, Robinson really could be similar to what he was last year, and that was like a lower end RB1. So, to me, he landed around like RB15 in the updated rankings on Draft Shark. So he's a guy like late 3rd round I'd start to consider. I think anywhere in the 4th round, he's a pretty solid pick.
Really quick before we move on, do you think Carlos Hyde, and I know Carlos Hyde's an OG name, I don't expect a huge carry load necessarily, but he's got the roots with Urban Meyer, can still catch the ball. He's been somewhat productive when he's given opportunity. Do you think Carlos Hyde has a bigger role now, or do you see them bringing in somebody that might get cut? Javian Hawkins, for example, just got cut. Some of these guys that might be floating around out there to bring in some depth.
I think Duke Johnson would make sense there. I'm a big Duke Johnson
agree.
fan. I want to see him land somewhere. But, if they kind of want to replace that Etienne pass catching stuff, I think, Duke could be that. I don't think there's anyone out there that's going to challenge Robinson for the lead role, though. So I think he's safe there. Yeah. Hyde, he turns 31 next month, and it's been limited work in the preseason, but he hasn't looked good to me. So again, I think Robinson should dominate touches there. Again, it's just a question of, does Urban Meyer agree?
Yeah, I think when you brought up that 3rd round ADP, that's the question, right? You're going to start taking James Robinson over like Cooper, Cooper Kupp, Mari Cooper, Allen Robinson, David Montgomery. It gets a little hairy there. So I do agree. Maybe we'll put you on the clock at some point later in this episode. We'll get your thoughts on some of these guys, but we're going to transition over to our must-haves. That's why we're here. We're here to talk about the must-have players. We got one of the best analysts in the game, and we're going to see who his must-have players are and also get his feedback on the guys that me and Sky are high on. So the first guy we're going to talk about today is a little bit of a polarizing guy. It's Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon, we know the talent. He's proven it. Some games he can't stay healthy, but offensive line, we get all that. But I'm really excited to get your thoughts on Joe Mixon. But when you look at Joe Mixon's last season, 15.2 points per game and half-point PPR, the RB10 in points per game. So we see that level of upside with him. Expert consensus ranking has him at 12. He's actually going a little behind that at 13 according to ADP. That's NFC ADP, and 20th overall. So what are your thoughts about Joe Mixon and what makes him a must-have player in 2021?
Yeah, and I think he's my RB9. So, it's not a huge gap, but, a gap of 3 running back spots in the 1st, 2nd round is pretty big. So, Mixon is a guy I have found tough to pass, basically anywhere in round 2. I try to force myself to not take him early round 2 because I know I'll get my shares, when I'm picking in the middle or back half of round 2. But so not to get too deep into the math here, but I looked into this, and over the past 3 seasons, a running back's volume, so his carries plus catches, that explains 2/3 of a running back's PPR production. That's 2/3 of it. The rest is, his talent, his supporting cast, maybe touchdown variance, but all that only adds up to like a third of, what these guys end up producing. So again, volume is what we care about at the running back position. And I have Mixon projected for the 6th most touches among all running backs this season. And really, it's not much different than what we got out of him last year. He averaged 19.8 carries and 4.3 targets per game last year. Only 3 running backs averaged more total opportunities per game: Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry. And, those guys are all going in the first 5-6 picks of fantasy drafts. Now you have Gio Bernard gone from Cincinnati. He averaged a little over 3 targets per game last season. Mixon could pick up some of that. So again, I just think he's a great volume bet. I still think he's a big talent. I think, that could be argued. Again, that's not as important as the volume projection. I just think that's going to fuel him. And then, if you think the Bengals offense is going to take a step forward, which it seems like most people do, considering, how highly those wide receivers are getting drafted, that can only help Mixon too.
I have been super high on Joe Mixon for the last couple of seasons. Last year, I got burned with Joe Mixon and Kenyon Drake, unfortunately. But he was my number 6 running back last year. I started him off this preseason at around 7 or 6 as well. And then Jamar Chase came in and Joe Burrow's not 100% yet and all these things. So I've been fading him down a little bit, but he's still an RB1 for me. Weeks 3 through 5 last year, where he really took off, 70% snap share. So as you mentioned, the volume is going to be there. 27.7 opportunities on average. So about 22 carries and 5.5 targets or so per game. You mentioned no Gio Bernard. He was already on pace last year for a career high 60 plus targets. So if he's able to get that and he gets that touchdown upside with Jamar Chase struggling maybe early season. And look, they may just try to protect Joe Burrow as well. I know we're not crazy about the offensive line necessarily, but Joe Mixon should be able to get a lot of that volume there. So I agree with you there on Joe Mixon. I'm happy to hear somebody else jumping on board there as well, because it is tough. He's just one of those guys that we all believe in the talent, but we're all kind of, I am at least, nervous about this offense bouncing back with Joe Burrow and things. And hopefully we can see some positive production there.
Yeah, the other thing with Joe Mixon, too, is he kind of slipped a little bit. 20th overall is not too bad anymore. He's not even a borderline first-round pick, which I think really kind of gives me that comfort inside. I feel good. Like the way you touched yourself, like you were like, Duke Johnson would be great. That's how I feel about Joe Mixon at 20. This is a nice feeling. I actually am all in now on Joe Mixon at 20. So now let's go to the next guy, Sky. This is going to be your guy. I know you've been talking about me and Sky butt heads on this guy and his counterpart, Amari Cooper, on who's going to be the number 1. So I'm excited to break this down with you, Sky. But CeeDee Lamb. No one's shy about CeeDee Lamb anymore. Even after last season, I know the Dak injury. We can go through his stats. It doesn't matter. Dak's back. The offensive line is healthy. Right now today, the experts love him. Our expert consensus ranking is 12. ADP, the public is higher at 11, and he's going 29th overall inside that top 30. So, Sky, talk to us about that must-have player, CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, and this comes down to last year, pulling the Calvin Ridley over the Julio Jones. And as you can see behind me, if you're on the YouTube, Julio Jones is my dog. But I just saw it kind of overtaking last year. Now, Julio, of course, went down with injuries, so you don't know what would have happened necessarily. Amari Cooper has been banged up for the last couple of years with lower body issues, foot issues. I know he's healthy now. He looks good in camp, whatever. But ultimately, he gave up about a month, even with backups there with the Cowboys. And CeeDee Lamb is just unreal talent-wise. So I think that he might surpass Amari Cooper potentially. And the reality is I have CeeDee Lamb higher than Amari Cooper in drafting. The public, I don't think, will. So on draft day, I think you're almost maybe going to get a bargain, quote-unquote, on CeeDee Lamb with a couple picks later, maybe in a round later than Amari Cooper. And I just expect over the season a better outcome there for CeeDee Lamb. Weeks 1 through 5 last year, of course, with Dak Prescott. We know he all went down in week 5, but while he was playing with Dak as a rookie in the COVID season with, no training camp kind of a thing, wide receiver 11 in PPR. He had 17 points per game. He was 6th in yards, 10th in targets, 11th in receptions, and averaged 2.14 points per target in those 5 games. He caught 74 passes and 5 touchdowns, falling just shy of 1,000 yards as a rookie, 935 yards, dominated the slot. 85% of his snaps were in the slot. That was 2nd in the NFL. I had mentioned Amari Cooper's foot. It looks good now, but he's had issues over the last couple of years. And I know this is silly, but I can't overlook something like this. Player Profiler compliments each player on there to somebody else in the, history of the NFL. Jerry Rice, of all players in the NFL, Jerry Rice is the comp to CeeDee Lamb. Don't hear what I'm not saying. You all know I'm a 49er fan. Let's not get crazy. But I can't overlook a comp like that, all right? So to me, CeeDee Lamb is just – and this one's a tough one because he's a must-have player, meaning I want him on my team, but I have to take him basically probably second round or early third. And, again, kind of risky because he's technically a number 2 on his team. But to me, I think he potentially surpasses Amari Cooper, assuming Dak is 100%. I believe in this entire offense, but CeeDee Lamb is the guy that I want. And if he's able to take that step like Calvin Ridley did last year, drafted in the 3rd, 4th round, he's now going as a top 5 wide receiver. I think CeeDee Lamb could be that guy next year, so I'm willing to go in on it this year.
Jared, give us your thoughts on CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, my issue with him all draft season is he just goes a little bit too early for me. And Lamb might be the one player who could totally sink me this season because I just don't have much of him. And honestly, the one guy I can't take Lamb ahead of that he usually goes ahead of is Allen Robinson. If you're in that early to mid 3rd round, I still prefer A-Rob. I won't get too much into him, but I'm with you that I think Lamb is going to outscore Cooper this season. I think Lamb becomes Dallas's number 1 wideout. My concern a month ago was that, last year Lamb was coming off the field in 3 wide receiver sets. He was only on the field when they went 3 wide in the slot. So he was only playing 70% of the snaps or so. What we've seen in the preseason now is he's on the field when they're in 2 wide receiver sets. He's even been on the field when they've gone 1 wide receiver a few times. So I think you're going to get him up to that, 90 or so % snap rate. And that was my concern with him all along. I guess the reason I'm still maybe a spot or 2 below consensus is just volume, target volume for him with Cooper there, with Gallup there. We know, Zeke's going to be a big part of the offense. So I just don't see Lamb getting 150 targets, which, I kind of do think Robinson will end up getting there.
You know what? Before I jump into my must-have, we got a fan question, and it's topical a little bit. We did break this down, so Jared, let's get your thoughts. The question is Carlos Hyde a good grab for an RB2 with ETN injury? So do you think he's even draftable? Do you think he could be a flex value in this offense this year?
I think he's draftable super late with one of your last few picks. I think he's probably just a handcuff. As the roster stands now, if Robinson went down, they'd kind of have to turn to Hyde as the clear lead guy. But they might add someone. So he's not someone I'm going to be targeting aggressively in drafts here. Gotcha.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about my must-have guy, and it's Cooper Kupp. Now, when I talk about Cooper Kupp, it really starts with the fact that, number one, Gerald Everett leaving might have a bigger ripple effect on this team than a lot of people think. The reason why is the Rams started dialing back how many times they used 3 receiver sets in the pass game. For example, in 2018, 94% of their pass plays were out of 3 receiver sets. In 2020, it dropped to 78%. Now, I know that's still pretty good, but that's almost a 20% delta between those two. And Cooper Kupp makes his living dominating the slot. So if he's not playing a lot of 3 receiver sets, he's playing more outside, or in some cases taking off the field. I think with Gerald Everett gone, I think that's an opportunity, of course, with Deshaun Jackson and Van Jefferson manning that 3rd receiver spot. Why is that important, though? Because we saw Cooper Kupp's target percentage drop from the slot. So in 2018, it was 82% of his overall targets were inside. In 2020, that dropped to 63%. Why is this all important? Why am I running off these numbers? Because when I looked at slot versus wide, Football Outsiders does a fantastic article. I expect everyone to do it. They talk about quarterback efficiency when they target the slot versus out wide. So I looked at Stafford versus Jared Goff. Now, no one targets the slot or middle of the field more than Jared Goff. But just because there's quantity doesn't mean there's necessarily quality. So when I looked at Stafford versus Goff, it's a huge difference. So over the last 2 seasons, according to Football Outsiders DVOA, Stafford had an 18% more efficiency ranking than Jared Goff. League average is 4.7% in their metric over the 2-year span, 19.7% for Matthew Stafford, 1.2 for Jared Goff. So Goff's a little bit under average, and Stafford is elite. So right there, that's a huge delta. Just for example, 18% doesn't sound like a lot, but that's the difference between Josh Allen last year and Gardner Minshew. I know we all love the haircuts and the stashes, but when it comes to throwing a football, Josh Allen's a little more elite than Gardner Minshew. But the reason why I'm also bringing this up is Jared Goff in 2018 had his best season when targeting the slot according to their metric. That season, Cooper Kupp only played 8 games, but 7 full games that season. He averaged 16.1 points per game and half-point PPR in those games. So when we saw Jared Goff playing at a high level, we saw Cooper Kupp take his game to the next level. And that 16.1 is elite. That would have been the wide receiver 4 just behind Stephon Diggs last year in that format. So you're inserting a guy like Matthew Stafford, who, by the way, way back in the day, was supporting Golden Tate with borderline wide receiver 1 seasons in these types of formats. We also haven't seen Matthew Stafford unleashed in forever. Over the last few seasons, he hasn't been hitting that 600 attempt mark they used to do back in 2015 and 16. So this offense is going to let him drop back and throw. I think that Cooper Kupp is now going to be that lead receiver, especially in the red zone. I think he's going to be a fantastic target for Matthew Stafford. I would take him right now today. He's going as the wide receiver 17. I have him all the way up to wide receiver 10. And this is going to sound crazy, but I take him over Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Allen Robinson, Godwin, and Evans. So, Jared, what's your thoughts? I know you're probably a little too bold, but that's just my thoughts on Cooper Kupp.
You're a bit higher than I am, but if you're a Draft Sharks insider, you know that we're very high on Cooper Kupp this season. I'll leave it at that. But Matt, to me, like the simplest thing is, he caught 92 passes last year and scored just 3 touchdowns. He ranked 9th among all wide receivers in catches, 60th in touchdowns. Like there's obvious positive touchdown regression coming for Cooper Kupp. He scored 10 touchdowns in 2019, so he's already showed us he can be a big touchdown guy. And you hit it on the head with Matt Stafford, just such a massive quarterback upgrade. I think we're going to see the best version of Sean McVay's offense this season with Stafford there.
And there's no hiding. There's no hiding the upgrade as well with Matt Stafford over Jared Goff in general. I broke down kind of some upgrades from Jared Goff and Matt Stafford, but Matt Stafford going from the Lions to the Rams, he upgraded in divisional pass rush rankings, going from the NFC North into the West. He upgraded an offensive line. The Lions are about 13th or so with PPF. They're 3rd with the Rams. Team scoring overall 11th now with the Rams, 21st on average last year over the last 3 seasons with the Lions. And then team pass attempts were pretty much average, but the Rams have the edge there as well. Quick question, Jared, will you take Robert Woods or Cooper Kupp in half or full PPR? I think that's the big question. Everybody loves both of them. I think everybody expects a big upgrade, but I'm kind of always on the fence of one or the other. I actually lean with Bobby. I lean Cooper Kupp because of the touchdown upside, but Robert Woods gets those carries. He gets the slot work. What are you feeling, one or the other here if you were on the clock?
Yes, I'm looking at the rankings right now. So I guess we actually do have Woods. I prefer Woods in PPR for sure. I think it's closer in half PPR. But I have Woods a few spots higher, but they're both in our top 15 wide receivers. Woods gets that sneaky rushing production. He runs for like 200 yards and a score or 2 every year, which kind of is a pretty big deal when you look back at it.
Jared, you brought up a really good point too about the receptions, right? And how many touchdowns he had So in 2019, he generated 223 fantasy points on 94 receptions. Last year on 92 receptions, 163. So something's got to give. It's bouncing back. But let's kick it over back to you, Jared, for your second must-have player. And that guy is Jerry Jeudy. Now, I've seen Jerry Jeudy's stock rise really fast. We're starting to see him go in like the 6th, 7th now. He was going 8th round a month or so ago. But when you're looking at Jerry Jeudy last season, I almost just give him a pass. Truthfully, I do, because the quarterback play, we'll go into that a little bit later, but expert consensus ranking has him at 31. He's going ADP a little bit higher at 27. He's going 62nd overall now. That's the 5-6 turn. So what's your thoughts about Jerry Jeudy? What makes him a must-have player for you?
Yeah, he's wide receiver 24 for me. Like in the 5th round, I'm fine taking him there. So I think he's still a value, even though, as you mentioned, not as big a value as he was, back in the spring. He's mostly a bet on talent for me. There were the drops last year that hurt his production. I'm not worried about those. Like he didn't have drop problems at Alabama. We've seen, drops are just like a volatile stat. They'll just, fluctuate from year to year. So I'm not worried about that. The quarterback play was the biggest issue last season. I think either way, whether it's Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock, he's going to get better quarterback play this season. Like either Drew Lock takes a step forward. If he doesn't, it's going to be Teddy. After what we saw in the second, honestly, both those quarterbacks to me have looked good this preseason. Denver's passing game has looked really good this preseason, even without Cortland Sutton. So I think he's going to get better quarterback play this season. But again, to me, Judy's a bet on talent. Like he was just an awesome prospect coming into the league. Won the Biletnikoff Award as a true sophomore at Alabama. Put up massive numbers as both a sophomore and a junior at Bama, despite competing with Henry Ruggs, Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, for targets over that span. Just a loaded pass catching core. And, Jeudy was kind of their top dog. And then you look at the camp reports and like everything you read out of Denver is, Jeudy's been the best player on the field. So I just think, we see these receivers take big second year leaps. I think, Jeudy's ready to do that this season. So again, anywhere in the 5th round, I like him. If you get him in the 6th round, I think that's pretty big value.
Your preference, per your preference, Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock, who would you rather see be the starter?
Yeah, so to me, Lock gives the whole passing game a higher ceiling, but a much lower floor. Mm-hmm. I'd rather just have Teddy because Teddy has shown he can be a ball distributor. He's like a point guard out there. And again, going back to Carolina, we saw it last year. He didn't have a big season, but he produced 3, fantasy starting caliber wide receivers. So like Jeudy, I think he's good enough where if he just gets average quarterback play, just get him the ball when he's wide open because he gets wide open with how good a route runner he is. I think Bridgewater is kind of all he needs to, again, break into that top 25.
There's a lot of mixed reports coming out of Denver. Not necessarily mixed reports, just mostly, unfortunately, kind of negative reports with Courtland Sutton recovering from his injury last year. And the mixed reports, I guess, are that he's either going to be ready to go week 1 100% or that he still doesn't look 100% when he's running routes and things like that. And maybe he's just not running 100% because it's still practice season. He doesn't want to overdo it. With that being said, though, do you see a scenario where Jerry Jeudy might slot into more of a 1A versus a number 2 early in the season, especially if it becomes Teddy Bridgewater, who seems to fit Jerry Judy's game a little bit more than Courtland Sutton?
Oh, yeah. See, I think Judy's the one there, even when Sutton's back to 100%. Okay. I like Courtland Sutton. I think he's a good player. I just think Judy's better. I do think Sutton gets off to a slow start, which is kind of another fact, mark in Judy's favor. But I think by October, you're going to have Sutton, close to 100%. But even then, I think Judy's going to, be the target leader, be the fantasy, point leader in that wide receiver core.
Just want to bring up some stats for Jerry Jeudy last year. Okay, so according to Player Profiler, he was outside the top 100 in catchable target rate, target quality, target accuracy. Okay, yep. So I just took a look at how if Teddy B wins the job. I heard some reports that actually they're saying that he might win it. It might be as soon as Monday we hear this information. So I looked at DJ Moore, Samuel, and Robbie Anderson last year. Did kind of a blended thing. On average, they finished 36th in catchable target rate, 39th in target quality, and 33rd in target accuracy. Now, that's not great, but it's better than outside the top 100. So I think right there, we're talking a huge improvement if it's Teddy B for Jerry Jeudy this season. Now, Sky, let's kick it over to you. Me and you kind of agree on this one. We're huge Ryan Tannehill guys, and we have him both as a must-have. But, I gave it to you for the show because I know we have plenty of stats on him. So Ryan Tannehill, listen, he finished as the QB 11 last year, but we've brought this up a bunch of times. QB 11 at 25.2 points per game and 6 points per passing touchdowns was significantly better than the next guy down, which was Kirk Cousins, and then it was Ben Roethlisberger. So there's a huge cliff. So he is still pretty elite. He's actually closer to the 6-7 range than he was 12-13 because of those points per game. He is going at expert consensus 9, ADP 11, and 97th overall. So, Sky, talk to us a little bit about what makes Ryan Tannehill a must-have player for you this season.
I'll break down all the numbers here in just a second, but if I just think on like a human level when I'm in regular, home leagues, work leagues, whatever, where guys like us get an advantage because we nerd out on this all day long, even though he's expert consensus ranking number 9 and ADP 11, I don't see him even going that high in public leagues because Ryan Tannehill's not flashy and he's not somebody that runs the ball. Now he's sneak attack rushing, right? Last year, 7 rushing touchdowns, easily a career high for him. I don't expect that to happen again, maybe 3 or 4 max, but he has the rushing ability. We saw against the Packers in Lambeau Field in the snow, a bootleg, right, where he was wide open. He ran for like a 60-plus yard touchdown. He has the ability to do that. He's just not flashy. He doesn't have the name and the pedigree of an Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady that are able to kind of get drafted earlier and not have the rushing upside. But the efficiency, as we know, with the Titans has been absolutely phenomenal the last couple of seasons. Now, Bobby, I know that you'd like to get into the Arthur Smith, Todd Downing situation. That's your cup of tea. I'll let you do that when I'm done here. So I'll let you kind of save the OC change for you. But last year he had career highs of 33 touchdowns, rushing touchdowns of 7, as I mentioned. This is year 3 in the system with A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry. Bobby mentions religiously on the show system continuity. I'll let him get into it in just a little bit, but it's a huge deal coming into the third year of a program, although they do have some mix-up happening with the OC and everything else. Now, of course, he gets Hall of Famer Julio Jones. That can only help you, even if he only plays in 10, 12 games. Julio Jones on your team is never a deficit. Tennessee last year was 4th in points scored, 2nd in total team yards on offense. Ryan Tannehill was 9th in completed air yards. That was a surprising stat that I found, because you kind of think as the Titans is Derrick Henry, and then play action dump offs. That wasn't necessarily the case. When they go play action, they like to air it out. Of course, A.J. Brown and now Julio Jones and Bobby's man, Anthony Ferkser. We'll see what happens there. 9th in completed air yards, 2nd in fantasy points per drop back. So although he doesn't throw very often, when he does, he's very efficient with that. 5th in catchable pass rate. So obviously very accurate and efficient. 4th in total QBR. And now, of course, he gets Julio Jones to help out with that. If Derrick Henry somehow slows down a little bit, the ceiling is even higher for Ryan Tannehill. Again, he's going ECR QB 9, which is still pretty rich because you're almost drafting him close to his ceiling. I've got him right there as well, but in public leagues, I think you'll be able to get him later than that. Derrick Henry had 378 carries last year. That's 75 more than his previous career high. 2,078 rushing yards, 487 more than his previous career high, 17 rushing touchdowns. He's still an animal. I love Derrick Henry, but I expect all of that to regress one way or another, even with the 17th game. And the Ravens, who are an elite defense, I understand, but the Ravens were able to hold him to 40 yards on 18 carries. If any other teams are able to do that, they're going to be able to unload in the passing game, again, adding Julio Jones. So Ryan Tannehill is a sneak attack guy. If you don't go early quarterback and you end up fading a little bit, he's not even a middle round guy. I think in public leagues, he's going to end up falling to late round quarterbacks. I would love to draft him in the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th round, where you're going to get him in most public leagues as your starting quarterback with huge upside and a great floor.
So, Jared, tell us a little bit about where you have him currently and what's your thoughts on Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear what you have on the OC change to Downing. So I don't really have a hot take on Tannehill. I'm just kind of like at consensus. If he's a guy, if I get into round 10 and he's like the best player available, I'll take him. I'm not super excited. My concerns are the OC change. I think Art Smith is like one of the best play callers in the NFL. They were so efficient in the red zone. I think Smith had a lot to do with that. My other concern too is just they're so thin at pass catcher. Like if Brown or Julio miss time, it's like pretty ugly there. And Brown and Julio have both already missed practice time in August. And Julio, we know his history. Brown has dealt with injuries throughout his first couple seasons. So I just think there's risk there. If one of those guys misses time, then Tannehill's kind of left with not a whole lot.
You don't love my boy Josh Reynolds?
You started something, Jared. You stepped into something, Jared. You stepped right into something here. We've mentioned Josh Reynolds way too much on this podcast. So, just want to bring up Todd Downing. And listen, people need to realize that when Matt LaFleur came over in 2018, Arthur Smith kind of took over that scheme from Matt LaFleur. But Arthur Smith was a part of that coaching staff since 2011. So he's been through Mike Mularkey, Mike Munchak. So that runs, they used to call their run game the exotic smash mouth. So that's how the run game focused they were. In that time frame from 2011 all the way to 2020, the Titans as a team were the lowest in dropbacks in the NFL. So over the Arthur Smith years, 534 dropbacks per season. Now, in Todd Downing's limited time, he comes from a Bill Musgrave style offense from his days with the Raiders. Now, the thing about Todd Downing, though, is his one season as offensive coordinator, his dropbacks were closer to 595. So that's where that kind of projection could see growing up for the Titans this year, because he's not as run-centric as Arthur Smith, but Arthur Smith comes from a different background. This predates Matt LaFleur. He was there from some serious run game guys, like head coaches. So I think there is some room for volume, but the offense by Todd Downing featured two receivers. Remember, Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree were the main focus of those Raiders, and that's kind of how I feel about Julio Jones and A.J. Brown. So I think there's a lot of parallels there for that offense. So I do see the volume going up, but like you touched on too, Arthur Smith, great play caller. 36% of Ryan Tannehill's throws were in play action. I mean, that's smart. It should be that high. So I am a little concerned. I think they'll be dialed back from an efficiency standpoint, but I think the volume will go up. All right, I'm going to go into mine. Listen, this guy, Jared, listen, I feel like I'm glad you're only hearing this for the first time, but anybody who knows me has heard this take 16.7 thousand times or whatever that number is now. So it's a high number, and it's Tyler Boyd. And listen, Tyler Boyd, for some reason, is the one guy who just stays exactly where he's supposed to. I mean, no one wants to make him, he's not going, like Jerry Jeudy and him are like best friends. They went to like high school together, and then Jerry Jeudy goes off to college and stops hanging out with Tyler Boyd. He's now at the fifth, sixth round. So Tyler Boyd is still going right now today. Wide receiver 33 in expert consensus, 33 in ADP. That's pick 77th overall. He's basically going at the back of the 7th round, closer to that 7-8 turn. I would bring up his stats last year overall, but like the 10.2 points per game in the wide receiver 39 finish does not tell the story for Tyler Boyd. So let's break down something with the Bengals first. I know Jamar Chase is coming into this team, but remember, A.J. Green, whether they were good or bad targets going to Green, there's still a boatload, over 100 targets vacated from A.J. Green. Giovanni Bernard is vacating a boatload of targets as well. This team is actually one of the players I highlight in my opportunity analysis because they have almost 200 available new opportunities this year. That does not include Tyler Boyd already getting well over 100 targets from last season. But if you look at this coaching staff first, Zach Taylor, his one season when he was with the Miami Dolphins, when he took over as the offensive coordinator, that was the one season that Jarvis Landry had his career high 166 targets that season. So even before the Bengals time, he had an offense where he featured a slot receiver in Jarvis Landry. So I know the offense is very pass heavy. Zach Taylor is actually projected to be top 3 or 4 in volume this season. The last 2 years, they're right around 600 attempts over the last 2 seasons under Zach Taylor. So you know they're going to have the volume to support 3 receivers. But now let's look at Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is one of the better slot throwers from his time at LSU. Listen, we all know about Justin Jefferson and how good he did at LSU, but I just brought up the slot versus wide with Cooper Kupp. Now let's talk about this with Tyler Boyd. Now, there's no quarterback that has a bigger efficiency differential from slot to wide than Joe Burrow. He's 17th in slot DVOA. He's 33rd in wide DVOA. And who lives in the slot? It's going to be Tyler Boyd. But let's take it one step further. Let's look at Boyd. So I like to give T. Higgins a break. He did not play in week 1. So I looked at weeks 2 through 11 when T. Higgins was involved and also Tyler Boyd and A.J. Green. From weeks 2 to 11, target distribution with Joe Burrow. 81 for Boyd, 70 for Higgins, 66 for A.J. Green. Points per game during that time frame, 13.6 points per game for Boyd, 12.1 for Higgins, and then 5.7 for Green, which is ridiculous. But the 13.6 points per game with Burrow over that stretch would have been the wide receiver 12 last year. Now, even before Joe Burrow, look at the time he spent with Andy Dalton. Dalton missed a lot of time in 2018. He missed 3 games in 2019. So if you just look at the games with Dalton, he was the wide receiver 19 in 2019 over that span and the wide receiver 16 in 2018. So this guy is consistently produced at a top 20 level. And last season with Burrow, we saw him flirting with wide receiver 1 value. We just brought up the fact that he's going as the wide receiver 33 in the 7th round. ADP price tag right now. Higgins 53, Chase 57, and Boyd 77. That's wide receiver 33. He's turning 27 this year. He's not 35. This is like the peak. Wide receivers peak at 26, 27. He's going into that, and I think this is going to be his career year, and that's why he's a must-have player for me. Jared, tell me how much you love Tyler Boyd, too.
I do love Tyler Boyd. I'm with you.
Yes.
He's been a value running on like 3 straight years now. Like people, he's just not exciting. He's like Jarvis Landry. These unexciting slot guys are just constantly undervalued. I think it's the case. I think he's going to catch a ton of balls for all those reasons you mentioned. And you have this, Chase stuff where he's struggling with drops. He, might not play every snap out of the gate. That can only help Boyd. And then the other thing too is that there's nothing to speak of at tight end in Cincinnati. CJ Uzomah, Drew Sample. So those 3 wide receivers could combine for 70, 75% of the targets. So there's room for all 3 of them to be easy weekly fantasy starters.
Now, Jared, you realize CJ Uzomah last year was like the tight end 6 in points per game, right? 2 solid games from it was dope.
That's like you said. I mean, Burrow likes throwing those passes over the middle, like you said.
There you go. You see, I love this. This is perfect. CJ Uzomah must have. There you go. That's Jared's last one. All right, let's get serious for the last one because I like this one. This is an interesting one. So we're going to talk a little bit Elijah Moore. Now, I like this because this is a guy you could definitely get in the double-digit rounds consistently still, even with some of the noise. So right now today, expert consensus has him at 58 for wide receivers. He's going a little bit higher in ADP at 53, but he's going at 121 overall. That's around round 10, 11. So give us your thoughts about Elijah Moore. Why is he a must-have player for you in 2021?
Yeah, he's wide receiver 44 in my rankings. I'd probably even draft him a few spots above that. He's a guy I'm like trying to make sure I get in every draft I do. And I'm honestly happy about that quad injury because it kind of like cooled the hype down on him because his ADP was climbing. He was back at practice today from the quad, so he's going to be fine for week 1. And again, Moore was just like the buzziest player in all of fantasy football. Really, from the moment he hit the field after getting drafted, and it's from multiple beat writers, multiple observers. You have coaches were talking him up. Robert Saleh was talking him up in the spring, kind of made an immediate impression. And really, to me, it wasn't that big of a surprise because I just thought this guy was an awesome prospect coming into the league. Elijah Moore led the entire country in catches and receiving yards per game last year. 10.8 catches, 149 receiving yards per game as a true junior, by the way. Then he goes to his pro day, clocks a 4.35 second 40 time, 87th percentile relative athletic score. So, he's a plus athlete, just kind of checks all the boxes as a prospect to me. The Jets make him the 34th overall pick of the draft. There was a report that, they had him as the 16th best prospect in the class. They passed on multiple trade offers, trade back from 34. They wanted to sit there and make sure they got their guy. So love Elijah Moore. I just think this Jets offense too is a bit undervalued because, of what it was under Adam Gase. Just Adam Gase leaving is going to boost this offense, just addition by subtraction there. Zach Wilson, I thought, especially in that second preseason game, looked good. I think, it's going to be a quarterback upgrade for them. So kind of buying the Jets offense in general. And Elijah Moore is definitely the piece I want. Definitely the guy I'm most excited about there.
Yeah, the thing too, well, before you say anything else, Scott, sorry, I wanted to say one thing too. There isn't a tight end pass catcher. Like Tyler Kroft is the number 1 right now, and Chris Herndon hasn't really been playing with the ones. Now with the Michael Carter thing you just brought up a little bit earlier, he's not even the main guy. I mean, it could be Tevin Coleman, Ty Johnson. So the pass catching threat at the backfield might not be elite either. So even if Corey Davis takes on more of the 1, there's still plenty of room for our 2 to succeed because of those other positions not being elite in the pass game. Scott, go ahead, man. Sorry.
I was just going to ask what you're making of this preseason last 2 weeks resurgence of Corey Davis hype once again. And is it legit, or is it because he's basically the only one out there right now? And one player that I really liked last year, never really got a shot, Adam Gase, Sam Darnold, yada yada, still kind of struggling early this season. But Denzel Mims, I think, is the real deal as an athlete if he can stay healthy. Do you think that Elijah Moore it just is going to be a concrete number 2? Could he slide into a number 1? Do you think Corey Davis is the real deal? The Jets is kind of a mess right now, and Zach Wilson has looked good in minimum work, but he's been hyper peppering Corey Davis. Do you think that that's going to stick, or is it because he's kind of, the odd man out right now, or the odd man in, I should say? Yeah,
so Davis was a guy I had as undervalued all offseason. So I'm kind of mad this preseason has happened because he's up into the 8th or 9th round now, which is about where he should have been going all along. He was a guy you can get in the 12th or 13th round in the spring. So, Davis, going back to the Titans was super good for them last year. I think he was 5th in yards per route run among 87 qualifying wide receivers. He got a big contract from the Jets. So, the Jets, I think, signed Davis to be their number 1. Mm-hmm. Now, Elijah Moore might be even better than they thought he was. I think it's going to be a 1A, 1B. I'm not even sure who's going to lead the Jets in targets. I think it's going to be really close between Corey Davis and Elijah Moore. So I like both those guys, and they're 2 guys I've been drafting quite a bit of.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about Corey Davis leaving, because the Titans, remember in 2018, they got Matt LaFleur, and now his brother is the Jets OC. So he does know some of the terminology from his times with the Titans because that offense was in place. So I like that kind of sneaky continuity. He might have even a leg up than most guys changing teams. So, all right, listen, our next segment we're going to do right now is called On the Clock. And what we do is essentially we take our guests and we take their hot takes and we see if on the spot they'll actually pick those players. So first off, I want to say this. On the Clock is going to be brought to you by one of our new sponsors who we love, and it's expandtheboxscore.com. Now, Expand the Box Score is one of the ways where a lot of fantasy people can get advanced stats at an affordable price. Now, typically, if you want PFF or Sports Info Solutions, they have packages that range from $200 to $700 for the year. Expand the Box Score offers you advanced stats for only $25 for the season. You're getting access to things like contested catch rates, routes run, broken tackles, missed tackles, things that you typically don't see a lot of all on one site for free. And the best part, too, is if you use that promo code TCK, you get $5 off, and then you also get a 4-day free trial. So you can check it out for 4 days, and if you don't like it, you can cancel it anytime. But that $20 for the entire season. So step up your game a little bit and go get expandtheboxscore.com. So first off, let's start with Joe Mixon. Now, I usually like to do like in between, but I put these guys at the end. I'm going to give you 6 or 7 guys going ahead of Joe Mixon, Elijah Moore, and Jerry Jeudy to see what your thoughts are. So you're in the second round, you're on the clock, and you're on the clock kind of early. You got Nick Chubb still available, Antonio Gibson, Najee Harris, Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, and DK Metcalf. Are you willing to take Joe Mixon over those guys in the second round?
I am. I've drafted Joe Mixon at 202 multiple times. So I
nice.
To me, Joe Mixon and Najee Harris are almost a toss-up. They're very similar. High volume guys behind questionable offensive lines, potentially behind questionable offenses, depending on what you think about Burrow and Roethlisberger at his age with the elbow stuff. But yeah, I like Mixon there. And yeah, I would, again, I've taken him a few times in early round 2.
1 for 1. All right. I like this. So down on to Jerry Jeudy. 2 weeks ago, I think this would have been a slam dunk. Jeudy going in the 8th round was a joke. Now he's bumped all the way up to the 6th round. But now you're starting to look at guys like Mike Davis, Kareem Hunt, Jamar Chase, Dak Prescott, a quarterback floating in there. Chase Claypool, TJ Hawkinson are in this range. Now you're on the clock at that 5-6 turn. Are you willing to pull the trigger on Jerry Jeudy?
So I'm taking him over the running backs for sure. I'm avoiding running backs in that range in general. I want to get a guy or two early. Then rounds 3 through like 7, I'm pounding receivers generally. I like Jeudy over Jamar Chase and Chase Claypool. Jeudy versus Dak and Hawkinson. That's a little tougher because it comes down to like team construction. If I already have like 3 solid wideouts, I do like Dak. I especially like Hawkinson. He's the guy that'd probably be closest to me between him and Jeudy. But yeah, more often than not, I'm going to take Jeudy over all those guys.
All right. Wow, 2 for 2. I've never seen this before. A lot of people pivot on the spot, but Jared, that's why you're one of the best, because even under the lights, you're still taking your guys. All right, now let's bump it over to Elijah Moore. Now you're back in the 10th, 11th round. Corey Davis, the guy we just talked about, is still on the board according to NFC ADP. Tony Pollard, let's say you just took Zeke in the first round. You got Tony Pollard available. Marvin Jones, Gus Edwards, David Johnson, Devin Singletary, a bunch of running backs in this range. Let's even so we got Marvin Jones, Corey Davis. Are you taking Elijah Moore in that spot?
I'm looking at my rankings right now, and I have Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, Marvin Jones. Bang, bang, bang. Back to back to back. So I am taking Elijah Moore over those guys.
That is so 3 for 3. I mean, listen, this is why we don't bring people like Jared on, because they break the score. So you know what I mean? He's great, dude. Honestly, I really appreciate that. Listen, Sky, I know Sky wants to say a couple things before we head out of here, but overall, from my perspective, I just want to say, man, I appreciate being on here. You've been working with you on Draft Sharks. It's been awesome, working with you on there, but I'm glad we got you on. Now that we know that you're like top 10 in season and draft, we're going to have to get you on again. So hopefully you can jump on again. But once again, thank you for joining us. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, hopefully you guys didn't jinx me, talking about all of this top 10 stuff. Hopefully I don't bomb this year.
That's true.
Yeah, it was great being on. You guys had some great takes, kind of making me rethink some of my thoughts on these guys. So it was really good.
Definitely would not be a good first impression if we jinx it here, and Jared will not be coming back.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to give a shout out one more time before we let Jared go. I want to give a shout out to our good friends at the Jersey Jungle. So if you're a fan of Ryan Tannehill, you're a fan of Joe Mixon, you're a fan of CeeDee Lamb, anybody else here, of course, you can go to the Jersey Jungle on Instagram, DM them at the Jersey Jungle. Use the promo code TCK for 10 to 15% off of 1, 2, or 3+ jerseys. These are stitch and twill authentic jerseys. You get them on NFL.com. They're about $120, $150. Jersey Jungle has them at $60 at cost. Use this promo code. They're closer to $50. You can get 3 jerseys for pretty much the cost of 1 on NFL.com, and they're the same authentic, high-quality jerseys. For those of you on the YouTubes can see right behind me, I've got Colin Kaepernick and Julio Jones today. They're both from the Jersey Jungle, high-quality stitch and twill. They're not the kind of the paste on that rub off in the dryer. They're high quality. You can wear on game day. Rep your guys. You guys know I swap out my jerseys every week. I got a new shipment coming in the mail, and I'll be unboxing that shortly. So make sure you go to Jersey Jungle on Instagram at the Jersey Jungle. DM them and look at the promo code TCK for 10% off of 1 or 2, 15% off of 3, Plus, they have baseball, football, basketball, home, away, retro, whatever you need. They got it for you. My man Trenton will take care of you. Jared, before we let you go, maybe the most important question of the entire episode. Any player in the NFL right now, rookie, veteran, somebody that one of your my guys, a must-have guy, whoever it is, a favorite player, whoever it is, who's one jersey you would love to have right now in the NFL?
How about a orange Jerry Jeudy?
Lou, love
There you
that.
go. There you
Like
go.
that. Nice,
He's-
nice and bright. Pops.
On brand all day today. I love
yeah.
it. Jerry Jeudy jersey takes all his guys. I love it.
Oh yeah, all
That
in,
was
all in.
scripted. Love it. Jared Smola, we appreciate your time, man. We're both big fans of you and your work. We appreciate you. Please remind everybody where they can go find all of your content.
Yeah, at Smola DS on Twitter, and then draftsharks.com. You know, our rankings, man, it's been a flurry of moves in our rankings, you know, really based on a lot of what we just saw in week 2 of the preseason, but those things are updated literally every single day. So hop in our new draft war room. You get customized rankings for your league, live syncs this year to your draft room, which is awesome. So you don't have to be marking guys off your rankings during your draft. It does it for you. I've been using that for all my drafts. It's a really great tool.
That's fantastic, man. We appreciate having you on. Bobby, it's always a pleasure, of course, and we want to make sure that we give a shout out to the Fantasy Focused Network and community. We are excited to be back with you. We'll be on tomorrow as well, and we are a part of the Fantasy Football Network as well on YouTube, so make sure you're going over there and checking out all of the YouTube content from over 20 different YouTube content creators. We're very excited to be a part of that brand. This episode and all episodes of the TCK Pod have been brought to you by BetOnline, BetOnline AG. You can get online or you can use the mobile app for all of your online sports betting experts needs. Jared Smola, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. We'll have to have you back on real soon. Best of luck the rest of the season. And of course, we'll be following your rankings closely. For my man, Jared Smola and Bobby LaMarco, I'm your host, Guasco. We are out of here.